On the 18th of June 2007, a passerby outside the Sofa Superstore outlet in Charleston, South Carolina, saw smoke rising above the showroom. He used his cell phone to call 911, and at the same time ran inside to shout a warning to the employees working in the store. Within 3 minutes, fire engines arrived and dozens of firefighters set to work in and around the burning building. The employees, now outside, said that there should be nobody else left within the store. The fire was small and confined to the loading dock. It seemed at first like a routine job for the fire department, but in the end it would be anything but routine. Indeed, it would end up claiming the lives of more firefighters than any disaster since the 11th of September 2001. The Sofa Superstore outlet in Charleston, South Carolina was the flagship store of a local chain, which operated 2 other furniture stores elsewhere in Charleston. The Sofa Superstore was, however, the first. It was a sprawling building that had been constructed in stages over the course of several years. The main building was originally a supermarket, built sometime in the 1950s or 1960s. It was taken over by Sofa Superstore in 1992 and converted into a showroom. Sofas and other soft furnishings are bulky and come in many varieties. Management soon decided that more floor space in the store was needed. 2 extensions were added to the building on the west side in 1994 and the east side in 1995. This added significantly to the available floor space. In 1996, another addition was made, a large warehouse at the rear of the building, connected by an enclosed corridor. Because these additions were made one at a time, each was considered by planners as a separate building, regardless of the fact that they were joined together. For this reason, despite the large size of the complex, no individual building within it was considered large enough to require a sprinkler system to be installed. This was the end of the store's official expansions, but several more additions were made to the complex of buildings without obtaining permits or permission. These additions effectively filled in the space between the warehouse and the showroom with an enclosed wooden loading dock and 2 workshops for furniture repair. These workshops, having been constructed without permission, were light, basic structures, essentially made up of wooden frames covered with sheet metal. Some areas at the rear of the showroom were also partitioned off in a similar fashion to create space for offices. This was also done without seeking permission from the city. From the front, the Sofa Superstore building would have looked like one large construction, as the 3 buildings that had been merged together to create it were unified by a tall facade. Large display windows were set into this facade to allow for the display of goods. Both the showroom and the warehouse were densely packed with soft furnishings and other similar items, arranged close together with relatively narrow aisles between displays. In the warehouse, items were stacked on steel shelves that rose 2 stories up to the roof of the building. On the 18th of June 2007, a fire began in the loading dock area of the Sofa Superstore building. The exact cause of the initial fire has never been determined, but it is suspected to have been a discarded cigarette. At around 7 p.m, the store was open, but no customers were present, and just 6 employees were on site. A passerby on the road outside noticed smoke rising from the building and called the emergency services. He then briefly entered the store and warned employees that there was a fire. After an unsuccessful attempt to control the fire with handheld extinguishers, 5 employees from the showroom lingered long enough to advise arriving firefighters of the location of the fire, then evacuated safely from the building. At this point, only 1 employee remained in the warehouse. Firefighters from 2 nearby firehouses were on scene within 3 minutes of the emergency call. The initial approach was for one team to attack the loading dock fire from outside, while another entered the showroom to evacuate any remaining employees. However, the fire quickly spread from the loading dock into the showroom. Thus, another hose was set up, running from engines at the front of the store, through the showroom, in an attempt to attack the fire from that direction also. This was a difficult task, as the showroom was crowded with furniture, which sometimes obstructed the hose line and made it difficult to navigate. Additionally, the first hose used was too short, requiring firefighters to exit and add an additional length of hose to the line so that it could reach the area where it was needed. Meanwhile, after several minutes of attempting to control the fire, the line being used to attack from the loading dock burned through. 2 firefighters barely escaped, with one noting afterwards that part of his helmet had melted from exposure to heat. Firefighters continued to attack from outside the loading dock. Meanwhile, another line was run in through the store. At this time, visibility inside the showroom was worsening due to smoke in the air. At least one firefighter noted that he had to follow the hose lines in order to find his way out of the building. Soon, as more smoke poured in from the fire, visibility in the showroom was almost non-existent. Firefighters now had to use breathing apparatus. At 7:26 p.m., the one remaining employee made a 911 call from one of the temporary workshops, where he was now trapped. Even as he made the call, he was using a hammer to try and batter his way out through a sheet metal wall, but was not succeeding. Within minutes, firefighters moved to the rear of the building. After breaking through a locked gate, they arrived on the other side of an external wall from the trapped employee, cut through it with power tools, and were able to rescue him. The building was now completely empty of employees, but there were many firefighters still inside. Worse, the situation in the showroom had deteriorated rapidly. It was impossible to see. The hoses were tangled in among the furniture. It was difficult to move around in the narrow, crowded aisles. The water pressure was insufficient and inconsistent, totally inadequate for any attempts to control the fire. Some firefighters had begun to run low on oxygen. Panicked calls were being made over the radio, creating a great deal of confusion. Firefighters, focused now on evacuating the store, ran into one another in the smoke-filled interior. So confusing was the radio traffic that the fire chief in charge of the scene did not initially realize that his men were in distress. An off-duty battalion chief, attending the scene in his own car, heard cries for help over the radio and rushed to find the chief and inform him. The situation was now chaotic and extremely serious. Heat and smoke were severe inside the showroom, and firefighters were lost within the building, their only hope being to find a hose line and follow it out. At the front of the building, their fellow firefighters broke the large display windows to create more routes out for those trapped inside. While this did briefly increase visibility and allow at least one firefighter to escape, it also allowed fresh oxygen into the store. Moments later, flashover occurred, and, just as a few more firefighters staggered out through the main door, most of the showroom was consumed by flames. In total, 9 firefighters did not escape. 34-year-old Captain Louis Mulkey, 49-year-old Captain Mike Benke, 46-year-old firefighter Melvin Champagne, 48-year-old Captain William Hutchinson, 37-year-old engineer Bradford Beatty, 56-year-old firefighter James Drayton, 40-year-old engineer Mark Kelsey, 27-year-old engineer Michael French, and 27-year-old firefighter Brandon Thompson. In the aftermath of this immense loss of life, the worst single loss of firefighter lives since September 11, 2001, multiple investigations were launched in an attempt to understand what had gone wrong and how similar failings could be avoided in the future. The condition of the building had contributed greatly to the severity of the disaster. Several exits had been padlocked, and at least one had been blocked by the placement of a shipping container. There were fewer exits than there should have been, as some exits had been filled in or blocked off when the non-permitted alterations to the building had been made. In addition to this, within these non-permitted additions, flammable materials had been stored and used. Ordinarily, this would not have been allowed in a building primarily designed to store and display soft furnishings, but the furniture repair workshops had been added without permission and had contained significant amounts of flammable materials. Inspections might have caught these issues, but annual inspections had ceased to be carried out by the city in 1998. Firefighters had also faced logistical issues when attempting to control the fire. The location of the store had meant that some engines had to rely on fire hydrants that were more than 0.8 kilometers or 0.5 miles away. Further to this, lines had been laid across roads without immediately stopping traffic, meaning that vehicles drove over the lines, compressing them and causing the water flow to be inconsistent. Some lines used to attempt to fight the fire were also of too small a diameter given the size of the blaze. These logistical issues had been further exacerbated by organizational problems. The chain of command had been unclear, with nobody taking adequate responsibility for overall strategy. At various times, senior firefighters who should have been monitoring the overall progress of the operation allowed themselves to be distracted by urgent tasks. For example, the assistant fire chief became closely involved in the rescue of the worker from the rear of the building, leaving his position to supervise this personally. He should instead have left that task to his firefighters and focused on the bigger picture. The two attacks, from the loading dock and from within the showroom, had not been well coordinated, and, in effect, had amounted to two separate operations, with little sharing of information and strategy between them. Additionally, the decision to aggressively attack the fire had not been revised at any time. While this was an appropriate response when dealing with a small fire in the loading dock, once conditions started to change, the overall strategy should have changed also to become more defensive. In theory, someone in command should have noted the crowded, confusing condition of the showroom, the limited exits, the declining visibility, and the issues with water supply, and made the decision to withdraw firefighters from the showroom the moment conditions began to worsen. All of this had been further complicated by the fact that the entire operation used only a single radio channel, a channel which quickly became overloaded and unusable as the situation worsened. At no point had any firefighter hesitated or failed to carry out their duty. They had fearlessly and determinedly faced a terrifying situation. But due to a lack of organization, clarity, and training, they had ended up in a position where 9 of their fellows would not be able to leave the store alive. Numerous changes were made to the way Charleston fire departments operated in the wake of the disaster, with recommendations published for the benefit of any other fire department which might be contending with similar organizational issues. Interventions included the establishment of new roles within the service, such as Deputy Chief, Safety Officer, and Public Information Officer. It also mandated significantly more training for firefighters and officers, the use of multiple radio channels, and the establishment of clear procedures for the overall management of an emergency. Equipment was upgraded and staffing levels were increased. The fire chief who had overseen the disaster faced strong criticism for his apparent reluctance to make these changes, and ultimately retired the year after the disaster. The site of the fire was eventually cleared and turned into a memorial park. Within this space, plaques are mounted at the exact locations where 9 firefighters fell as they carried out their vital but dangerous work.